Japan's 2011 earthquake. So, how did it happen? So, Japan is situated along the Pacific Ring of Fire, which is the most active earthquake belt in the world. Basically, what's happening around here is that the tectonic plates are constantly moving past each other, and sometimes because the plates have rough edges, they're not smooth, so they can't pass each other by smoothly, they get stuck. And when they get stuck for a period of time, they build up energy. And then when the movement finally occurs, the stored up energy is released. And thus, an earthquake happens. And so since Japan is along these fault lines, they had a major earthquake on March 11th, 2011, and the earthquake was an 8.9 earthquake. So the picture here shows how it originated about 373 kilometers away from Tokyo. And then it just shows the ripples and how strong the surrounding area it affected was. So after the earthquake, a tsunami hit. So how did the tsunami form? So earthquakes can naturally trigger tsunamis under the right circumstances. Like the strength of the earthquake has to be above 7.5. For instance, yeah. And then tsunamis form when the land along the fault lines move up or down, creating displacement of entire water columns. That then creates a wave of energy that moves the water to form a tsunami. In this case, the tsunami was 30 feet, the wave was 30 feet tall, which is about 10 meters in height. And then the image here just shows you the shore of Japan getting flooded. So what are some human health and social impacts? So Japan's diet was altered because the population was advised not to eat any food that came from the contaminated areas, like the leafy veggies, or herbs, or wild plants. This is because leafy veggies, since they have large leaves, they collect more of the radiation that was exposed to them. And then females were told not to breastfeed, even though it gave the infant immunity to certain diseases and such. The negative aspects of possibly giving more radiation exposure to the little infants, the negative aspects outweighed the positive ones, so they were told not to breastfeed. And also, tap water was advised not to be used for consumption, so only to be used for bathing, laundry, or dishes. It's because the tap water was contaminated with a lot of radiation and elements. This is because the tap water was not safe for consumption because it had a lot of iodine 131 and calcium and such, so it was really bad for the body. So, for instance, this chart here shows that Japan raised its standard for tap water, and so then iodine 131 could be the maximum amount could be 300 BQ per liter, which is about 2,700 times greater than the EPA allows in the USA for our tap water. Also, some economic consequences was that since the nuclear power plants provided about 1/3 of Japan's electricity, and then after the triple disaster, the earthquake, tsunami, and nuclear meltdown, that only 2 nuclear reactors reopened. So then they had to import electricity and generators to fulfill the generation capability. And also the immediate damages for the disasters was between 100 to 235 billion dollars, and it would take a minimum of 5 years to rebuild. Also, another environmental consequence was that greenhouse gases were released during the meltdown, such that it kind of affects the ozone, because CFCs, HCFCs, HFCs, and sulfur hexafluoride, along with other hydrocarbon emissions, were released into the atmosphere. And we know that it came from the Japan nuclear power meltdown because about a year later, 50% of the hydrocarbon emissions increased by 50%, and HFC 134 and HFC 32 rose by 49% and 63% compared to previous years. And then, although these gases contribute to global warming, they aren't as destructive as methane or carbon dioxide. But since they were released in such large quantities, that it still affects us. And also, following the quake, society and like scientists and the political figures are having trouble deciding whether or not the countries now should report any pollution that was released into their annual pollution records caused by natural disasters. So they're debating about that if they should allow that or not. Another environmental consequence was the nuclear meltdown, how released radioactive waste into the ocean and surrounding area. It's because the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant had a level 7 nuclear meltdown, and then about 300 tons of radioactive waste leaked from the plant into the Pacific Ocean. This is still here today, and so it's really harming the whole world basically because the water cycle. So then the rain that comes toward the United States could have radioactiveness in it, and then the waters plants, and then animals eat the plants, and we eat the animals. So like it's indirectly affecting us, and plus it destroys the marine habitat ecosystem. And so then here, okay, and then 2 years after the triple disaster, you can tell how like on the left side, this picture shows like the place was like a complete mess. But then 2 years after, they cleaned it all up, and then it's just basically, and so the aftermath of it is that now Japan is rebuilding and rebuilding the houses and homes that were lost during this. And also, Japan will also be more proactive about their technology, like how they use it, because they were doubting that their technology rated the earthquake as an 8.9 because never have in Japan's 500 years history have they had an earthquake that large. And so they didn't believe it. They thought the technology was lying to them. And so then now they're not going to do that anymore because they now know that you can't really depend on history to show patterns exactly. And also, Japan will also utilize their extensive warning and alarm system more carefully and improve it more because, one, Tokyo was affected by the earthquake, but they weren't alerted because the scientists did not think that it was necessary to alert them because they didn't believe the earthquake was large enough. And also because after the earthquake, the people on the shoreline were going to be affected by the tsunami. But since communications were down, they didn't realize that the tsunami was coming until it was a bit too late.